This lesson is about conjunctions, the words we use to join different elements of a sentence together. There are three types of conjunction: coordinating, subordinating, and correlative. And we're going to look at each of these in turn. There are 7 coordinating conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. The first letters spell fanboys, which is a handy mnemonic for remembering them all. Coordinating conjunctions connect words or groups of words that are grammatically equal to one another. They're like the equal sign in an equation, because the elements on each side have to balance each other. If we visualize the structure as a seesaw with a coordinating conjunction at the center, the words on each side have to share the same grammatical form. As long as the elements on each side balance each other, you can use one of the fanboys to join them together. Coordinating conjunctions will connect 4 types of element: single words, phrases, independent clauses, and dependent clauses. When we use them to connect single words, the words have to be in the same word class: nouns with nouns, verbs with verbs, adjectives with adjectives, and so on. In this example, the first word is a noun, toast. So the word that comes after and has to be another noun. We can't use an adjective, such as angry, for example. Saying I had toast and angry for breakfast just doesn't make sense. But if we substitute the noun egg, it does make sense. I had toast and egg for breakfast. You can also use coordinating conjunctions to connect matching phrases, such as noun phrases, prepositional phrases, or adverbial phrases. Here are 2 adverbial phrases as examples: in silence and with good humour. The whole sentence might be, she ate her breakfast in silence, yet with good humour. When we join 2 independent clauses together with a coordinating conjunction, we're making a single sentence out of 2 separate sentences. As you know, an independent clause is one that can stand alone as a meaningful statement. She ate her breakfast is an independent clause, and so is she was angry. So in this example, we could join the 2 clauses with the coordinating conjunction but, making the sentence, she ate her breakfast, but she was angry. We can use coordinating conjunctions to join dependent clauses as well. Here's an example. After she finished her breakfast, but before she left the table. So this might join to an independent clause such as, I decided to speak to Sally. The sentence then reads, I decided to speak to Sally after she'd finished her breakfast, but before she left the table. So that's how coordinating conjunctions work. They're small words that we use all the time, probably without paying them much attention, but they do perform an important function. Now, let's move on to subordinating conjunctions. These are much more numerous than coordinating conjunctions. Here's a list of the most common ones. Subordinating conjunctions are different from coordinating conjunctions in a couple of ways. First, they only join clauses together, not single words or phrases. Second, unlike coordinating conjunctions, which act like connectors that plug in between 2 elements, subordinating conjunctions alter the beginning of a clause so that it can join onto another clause. Here's an analogy that illustrates the difference. Imagine that clauses are like electrical cables. Independent clauses all end with sockets, that is, holes. So there are two ways of joining them together. One is to find an adapter that has prongs on each side. That's your coordinating conjunction. The other way of joining the two leads is to change the socket on one of them to a plug. So you can just plug it straight into the other clause's socket. This is your subordinating conjunction. When you insert a subordinating conjunction at the beginning of an independent clause, it changes the clause into a dependent clause so that it can no longer stand alone and has to be connected to an independent clause. Along with relative pronouns, subordinating conjunctions are often called dependent marker words. This is because they mark the beginning of a clause as dependent. Here are a few examples of how they work. In this example, the second independent clause, "I would not take the trouble of practicing," is transformed into a dependent clause by splicing the subordinating conjunction "because" onto the beginning of it. Now that it's a dependent clause, "because I would not take the trouble of practicing," it naturally joins with the other clause, but then I have always supposed it to be my own fault to create a new sentence. But then I have always supposed it to be my own fault because I would not take the trouble of practicing. Did you notice, by the way, that the first clause starts with "but"? You may have been taught that you shouldn't ever start a sentence with a conjunction, but that's a false rule. Jane Austen and a multitude of other respected writers frequently start sentences with "and," "but," "because," "however," and so on. So if you do it too, you're in good company. That may have sounded complicated, but it's actually very simple to get the hang of subordinating conjunctions once you understand their role as the marker word for a dependent clause. Here's another example that may make it clearer. Inserting "unless" at the beginning of "you stand up with one of your sisters" transforms it into the dependent clause "unless you stand up with one of your sisters," which then joins seamlessly to the first clause to make a new sentence. Balls will be absolutely prohibited unless you stand up with one of your sisters. In this example, the dependent clause comes first. The subordinating conjunction "since" combines with the independent clause "I wrote the above" to create the dependent clause "since I wrote the above." We want to connect it to the independent clause "something has occurred of a most unexpected and serious nature." Notice that in this instance the prongs and sockets don't line up, so the two clauses can't click together like they did in the other examples. The solution is to insert a comma, which then shows the reader that the clauses are still to some extent separate and that the first clause is subordinate to the second. Since I wrote the above, comma, something has occurred of a most unexpected and serious nature. If a dependent clause comes after an independent clause, you don't need to separate them with a comma. The dependent clause just runs straight on from the end of the first clause as it does here. Something has occurred of a most unexpected and serious nature since I wrote the above. Right, now it's time to turn our attention to correlative conjunctions. These are conjunctions that work in pairs, as in the examples listed here. The words that follow each part of the pair should be grammatically consistent with the phrase that precedes the conjunction, which we call the stem phrase. The two parts of the conjunction act as a kind of bracket, so that the words that follow them are both served by the stem phrase. Each of the phrases is like a branch from the same stem. Look, it's easiest if I show you how it works. Here we have a sentence. This gizmo can not only scratch but also tickle. When you analyse it, it's really making two separate statements. This gizmo can scratch and this gizmo can tickle. Now, when you join them together by using the correlative conjunction not only but also, the two parts of the conjunction act as a bracket, so that you only need to say this gizmo can once, because it now serves both statements. Now, let's analyse a slightly different sentence. This gizmo can not only scratch but can also tickle. Can you see anything wrong with this? Pause the video here if you like and try to decide why the sentence may be grammatically incorrect. Well, if we subject it to analysis, as we did for the other sentence, it immediately becomes apparent that you don't need to repeat the auxiliary verb can in front of the main verb tickle, because it's redundant. If you did include it, what you'd be saying is, this gizmo can tickle. Now, how about this example? Is it correct or incorrect to use can twice? Pause the video to think about it. Well, in this case, the auxiliary verb can appears after the first part of the conjunction, so it's not part of the stem phrase and has to be repeated after the second part of the conjunction. And did you notice that the verb goes in between but and also? In this example, the first part of the conjunction comes at the beginning of the sentence, so there's no stem word serving both sections. Even so, the same rule holds. The words that come after each part of the conjunction have to match grammatically. Here, the first part contains a subject, this gizmo, a verb, is, and a noun phrase, an awesome scratcher. It's mirrored by the second part of the sentence, which also contains a subject, it, a verb, is, and a noun phrase, an effective tickler. By the way, it doesn't matter what order the words come in, as long as they both contain the same grammatical elements. In this example, is comes before the subject in the first clause and after the subject in the second, but that doesn't matter. The two phrases have essentially the same grammatical structure. In the examples we've used so far, we've only applied the not only but also conjunction, but the same rule applies for all correlative conjunctions, as I'm about to show you. The stem words are in blue and the conjunctions in red. This gizmo will either scratch or tickle, or this gizmo either will scratch or will tickle. This gizmo can both scratch and tickle, or this gizmo both can scratch and can tickle. This gizmo is able to neither scratch nor tickle, or this gizmo is able neither to scratch nor to tickle. Just as this gizmo scratches, so it tickles. I don't want to overcomplicate things at this stage by introducing the exceptions to the rule, but there are cases in which correlative conjunctions don't balance, yet are still grammatically correct. I'm just flagging it for now, and we may go into it in a more advanced lesson later. For the time being, though, let's just assume that the rule holds in the vast majority of cases. Okay. So that's all I have to say about conjunctions for now. Let's just take a minute to review what we've learned in this lesson. Conjunctions are joining words. A coordinating conjunction joins elements that are grammatically the same. A subordinating conjunction converts an independent clause into a dependent clause that can then be joined to another clause. A correlative conjunction has two parts, and each part branches off from a single stem phrase. The words in each branch should be grammatically consistent, both with each other and the stem phrase. In the next lesson, we'll be looking at prepositions.